All right, so this week we are on Genesis chapter 32, Vayishlach, and thank you for Zach for reading through the Torah portion. Hopefully you've had an opportunity throughout the week to look at it also. But this is the portion where Jacob is returning back to the promised land. He is leaving his uncle Laban and their household in Padan Aram, and instead he is heading back to what God has told him he wants him to go. And what happened last week, remember, not only did he left, but it was in the scurry of the middle of the night, so to speak, and trying to escape Laban's clutches. And as soon as he does, Laban chases after him and is going and chasing his son-in-law and acting like he's going to do harm to him. So Jacob's really concerned about that. But as he's heading back into the promised land, lo and behold, who's waiting for him? His brother Esau, who he's now deceived twice, and not only taken his birthright, but also his blessing from his father. And he left him with, remember, what did Esau say he wanted to do to his brother? Anybody? Kill him, yeah. So he's got the bad guys in the back in the form of his uncle, and the bad guys in the front in the form of his brother. Not a great situation. Between a rock and a hard place, we could see. Does anybody else remember a situation in the scriptures where a group of people was between a rock and a hard place? Israelites, yes. That's right, in the Exodus. Coming out of the land of Egypt, who was chasing them? But of course, Pharaoh. But on the other end, what was the thing that was keeping them from being able to flee? Anybody? The Red Sea, that's right. So the Red Sea was on the front, Pharaoh on the back, children of Israel in the middle, stuck in a very narrow spot where they couldn't get out, and wondering what in the world's going to happen. And I guess in the course of today, we're going to look at that idea of when we're stuck between a rock and a hard place, what do you do? All right? Kind of want to more ask some questions and get feedback today. And I'm mostly just going to look at Genesis chapter 32, a touch of Genesis 31, and a touch of Genesis 33, but mostly all in Genesis 32 today. As we start out in this section, it says, so Jacob went on his way, and the angels of God met him. When Jacob saw them, he said, "This is God's camp." And he called the name of the place Machanaim. All right? Machanaim. All right? That comes, it's interesting because that phrase there in talking is, I was going through, and as Jacob was reading, it was coming, it just things were hitting it between my wife and I, so we were like, hey, did you see that? And hey, did you see that kind of thing? And it was amazing how many words throughout the entirety of this Torah portion connected to this word Machanaim. Now, if you look at Machanaim, I'm going to try and write some stuff on the board here real quick because I just thought it was so interesting. Oops. Somehow you might have to hit me down there. So I want to do that. Now you can turn me back up. I wonder if there's, yeah, that's why. All right. So you can turn me back up. Machanaim. I wrote that a little bit further out than what it would probably be if you actually transliterated it. But in the middle is a word. Does anybody see the word in the middle? It looks like chana, right? Actually, it's pronounced chana. Now, that is the name that a lot of people would know as Hannah, or as my lovely wife's name is, Anne, if we go all the way into English. Now, Hannah is what anglicized version of Chana is in Hebrew, but it's the term Hannah. Now, Hannah is the female version, and I'll try to write this up there, of the male word Chen. All right, has anybody ever heard of the word Chen in Hebrew, besides my wife who we were just talking about it? Anybody? Huh?
Sorry, I know.
Yeah.
Kind of.
So, Noah found blank in the eyes of the Lord. Grace, that's right. So that's the term grace. Now, I always love asking this question. I love taking words that we all are so familiar with but have no clue and really getting people to think about it. What does the term grace mean? What is if you had to define grace, how would you define grace?
Unmerited.
Unmerited favor, yes. There we go. All right, unmerited favor is a pretty common definition among Christianity that a lot of pastors will spit out there. Another way, a lot of people might just say favor. Okay, but what is favor? What does it mean to favor? Kind of a tough. See, it's one of those words, I think, that grace is one of those words where we all take it for granted. We know what it is, but nobody really knows what it is. There was a commercial I've watched recently where a young kid, like 10, a group of adults around, they're all talking, and the kid goes, they're talking about the economy. And they're all saying these different things, and oh, yeah. The kid goes, what's the economy? And they're like, because nobody can describe the economy in a definition for the child. That's kind of what I think grace is kind of like. So it's always fun when you can go and pull things, the covers back, or the shades back away and open something up to people. The word chana is translated grace or favor most of the time. Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord. But what happened to Noah? How did he find grace? What is it that happened to him that exemplified the term grace? He lived. But how did he live?
Righteous.
Now you're getting into how, but that's not how he was covered, wasn't he? What was it? He was saved from the flood. And how was he saved? He was in essence covered. An ark, that kind of idea. But the term grace actually does connect to the idea of covering a little bit. It actually, in some of the lexicons, it says that the term means protection. The term chana in the Hebrew means protection. All right? So, in this term for what we're learning today, chana, and then we have the mem, ma to the front of it, all right? It's the Hebrew letter mem, and that word means great. And so, chana means great protection. All right, now, this is the term that is translated as encampment. How many of you have ever watched old westerns before? If you have two hands, if you've watched several of them. All right. So in the old westerns, I grew up watching a lot of the 30-minute westerns on Saturday afternoons. Gunsmoke, The Rifleman, Wanted Dead or Alive. What's the one with Clint Eastwood? Cattle Range one. Roman. Rawhide. Thank you. The list goes on. But what happened when all the settlers were in their wagons and they were going on, and they stop either at night or the Indians come and attack? What happens?
They take cover.
Where? They're in the middle of nowhere in the desert.
So wagons create.
Someone said it. They circle the wagons, right? Don't they? All the wagons come around and they start circling up, and then all the settlers are on the inside and the Indians are going around the outside, right? And that's the best ability for protection they have, is circling the wagons. That is the idea of grace. the idea of God circling the wagons of protection around us. And this machana, this great protection, is the idea of an encampment. And in the understanding of historically at this time in history, an encampment could go as up to 50 different tents. And these aren't little like pop-up peewee tents like you'd have from Cub Scouts with the little thing on the front and like this, and that's about, they're about two people squished together space. Now these are tents, folks. I'm talking like, if you've ever seen Bedouin tents, if you haven't ever done that, go on Wikipedia or internet, search them. And I mean, like a tent could be the size of this room. The typical one's probably at least half of the size of this room. And that would be an average tent. Now imagine 50 of those, all encamped around each other in a circle. And all the women and children doing the things that they would do all day while the men were out around and about with the herds, herding and taking care of the flocks, the women would be in the center of that to protect them from being attacked by anybody or wild animals getting them. They would have to go through all the herds and all the men before they could ever get to the women and children. That's the idea of machana and how it relates to grace. Now, in this passage today, he says in verse 1, now, so Jacob went on his way, and the angels of God met him. When Jacob saw them, he said, this is God's machana, great camp. And he called the name of that place Machanaim, or the place of great encampments. Whenever you add im on the end in Hebrew, that means it's a plural or multiple of that thing. So this is the idea of grace that's found throughout this whole section here. So whenever you think of see the term grace, think God protecting, putting his protection around us. And in essence, grace is giving us the ability to be protected from sin. We have a whole encirclement of God and his Spirit around our lives, trying to keep us from falling into sin and keep us away from the adversary, from Satan. So in this whole section here, again, Laban's chasing Jacob. And there we have a juxtaposition between two places. Laban lived in, I'm going to just erase some of this. Laban lived in Padan Aram. All right? Is that in the land or outside of the land? Outside of the land, right? So we're going to say the land is a big piece of cheese, like a wedge of cheese. That's Israel today. Okay, that's the land. Padan Aram's up here somewhere. So he was coming this direction to get into the land. Esau was waiting for him here. All right, Laban was chasing him from up here. All right, so we could say, in essence, because this Padan Aram is kind of on the top end of the part of what would be called Mesopotamia or Babylon. So Laban was chasing Jacob from Babylon, and he was going to the land. Amen? So when he gets to the land, God meets with him and says, no longer is your name going to be Jacob, but what does he change his name into? Israel. So Jacob's being chased from Babylon into Israel, and God changes his name to that. A prince of Elohim is what, in essence, Israel means. And his descendants, physical descendants, become the children of Israel. Now, when we look at the book of Revelation, from Genesis to Revelation, come to the last book of Revelation, what does the book of Revelation tell God's people to do? Keep the testimonies. Keep testimony. And it says that those who are his people and will be part of the first resurrection have faith in Yeshua and keep the commandments. Of God. Or of Yehovah. I'm going to do that. So, as part of that whole thing, John has a strong, emphatic statement that he gives. And it's actually the name of a book that a lot of people in the Torah community know. And he says, "Come out of her, my people." Anybody know what the her is? Babylon. So come out of her, Babylon, my people, and where are we going to go, according to Scripture? Same thing that Jacob did, from Babylon to the land. So we see the promises of Yehovah from the beginning all the way to the end stay the same. And what are the responsibilities of those who want to be part of God's people? Two things. Keep testimony by keeping the commandments of God, and faith, trust in Yeshua. So that is what Yehovah is seeking to do in the life of Jacob. And as we look in these chapters, we see that he's trying to do this in each and every one of our lives. Our songs today, I thought, did a very good job of connecting a lot of the things that talked about Jacob's life in this section here. And I want to kind of ask some questions and have us see if we can't answer some of these questions and share some discussion at this time. Laban chased Jacob out of Babylon while Esau was blocking Jacob from entering Canaan. What is the message here about how Yehovah directs our steps? What is the message we could get out of that section there between Laban and Esau and the chasing of Jacob from one to the other?
In the middle of two hard places.
Stuck in the middle of two hard places? Has that ever happened to anybody? Do you ever be stuck in the middle of two hard places or feel that? Today. I think that is, I think of my mother-in-law who is stuck in the middle of two hard places. One, she's leaving a house that she's lived in for 20 years and has a lot of memories. The other is coming here and being stuck in a new house. And but the one there's nothing else left but the house. Here there's family and friends, and she's got stuck between in essence a tough decision on two ends. Compared, how did Jacob deal with his enemies? What lessons of trust did he have to learn before he saw the hand of Elohim move on his behalf? We've looked at over the last few weeks at the life of Jacob. Where did Jacob start from? Where was he originally at? Anybody?
His father's house.
His father's house, right? And what was the last thing that happened in his father's house? Anybody?
The birthright.
The birthright, deceit, the struggle between him and his brother Esau, right? The last thing was actually the blessing. He lost. Jacob took the blessing from Esau. And what was Esau's response? He's going to kill him. He said, "I am going to kill my brother." That was plain and simple, straightforward in the scripture. So he was fleeing his father's house and his brother. And his mom said, "Get out of here, and the place you need to go is to my family." That was the only thing he had as an instruction. Go to my family. And that's what he did. Didn't have any clue. He never, not like, this was a family holiday that they did several times throughout his life, is it? He'd probably never met anybody from his mom's extended family because that was hundreds of miles away. I think someone said it was probably a month's journey that Jacob was on to go between where he was at in Israel up to Padan Aram at that point in time. What did he leave with? Well, yeah, he left with one thing. It says in Scripture that he had one thing. Zach read it this morning, excuse me.
The staff.
His staff. He had a staff. That's what he had. Not much, is it? Not much at all. Unless you're on a good hike, you understand a good staff is a nice thing, but that's about all he had. Not much to really go with. So he left with nothing. He goes to a place he has no idea about. What got him there in the first place? We talked about it already, and I know, but think about it. What was this a good thing that got him there? Was he doing right? Did doing right get him fleeing his father's house? No. What did he do? Carrie said, you said it.
Deceit.
He practiced deceit, didn't he? He stole his brother's birthright and his blessing. And that's what got him kicked out of his house and fleeing for his life to the place he had no idea about. Chapter 32 here is a study in how we often deal with major trials and stressful situations in life. What were some ways that Jacob was known for dealing with situations in his life? He deceived was one of them. Any other words come to mind?
He thought he could work like many, many years to get something, but it never really got him what he wanted.
All right, thought he could work many years to get something, but never got him what he wanted.
He wrestled with.
He wrestled. He fought. He. What did he try to use to make everything work? His own strength, right? He always tried to get things on his own, and he thought he could finagle and deceive and twist everything in order to get things to work out the way he wanted them. That doesn't sound like anybody we know at all, does it, in our lives? No one does that anymore. We're all wonderful, happy, and hunky-dory. Unfortunately, people do that all the time, don't we? And we see that throughout our culture today, a prevalence, really, of people striving to do this. Jacob was gripped by fear, resorted to fleshly schemes to appease his brother's wrath and to save his own hide and that of his family. And at the same time, he expressed faith in Jehovah by uttering what some consider to be the first prayer in Scripture, which is found in verses 9 through 12 of Genesis 32. How often when facing serious trials do we take the shotgun approach by throwing everything we have at the problem, the strong arm of the flesh, as well as our mustard seed of faith? Yeah, doink! And hope that gets us what we want, right? Now, does Jehovah's grace or protection cover us in such situations? Yes. Whoever said it, that's right. Yes is the answer. Yes, it does. Does it always get us what we want? No. Not always. Not often. Some scriptural context. Did Yeshua heal the man's son who said, "I believe, help my unbelief"? In Mark 9:24. If you want to turn over there, Mark 9:24.
Again?
9:24. I'm going to go back a little bit further. Coming to the disciples, he saw a great multitude around him, this speaking of Yeshua, and several Sophrim, which I'm assuming is that Sadducees or Pharisees, or scribes. Scribes questioned them. Immediately all the multitude, when they saw him, were greatly amazed, and running to him, greeted him. He asked the scribes, "What are you asking them?" One of the multitude answered, "Teacher, I brought to you my son, who has a mute spirit, and wherever it seizes him, it throws him down, and he foams at the mouth, and grinds his teeth, and wastes away. I asked your disciples to cast it out, and they weren't able." He answered them, "Unbelieving generation, how long shall I be with you? How long shall I bear with you? Bring him to me." They brought him to him, and when he saw him, immediately the spirit convulsed him, and he fell on the ground, wallowing and foaming at the mouth. He asked his father, "How long has it been since this has come to him?" He said, "From childhood. Often it has cast him both into the fire and into the water to destroy him. But if you could do anything, have compassion on us and help us." Yeshua said to him, "If you can believe, all things are possible to him who believes." Immediately the father of the child cried out with tears, "I believe, help my unbelief." When Yeshua saw that a multitude came running together, he rebuked the unclean spirit, saying to him, "You mute and deaf spirit, I command you, come out of him and never enter him again." Having cried out and convulsed greatly, it came out of him. The boy became like one dead, so much that most of them said, "He is dead." But Yeshua took him by his hand and raised him up, and he arose. So we see there that even in our unbelief, Yah can help our belief and bring us closer to him if we are willing. And even in our failings, he provides grace in time of need. Does Yehovah sometimes force us into situations where we literally have to come to the end of our schemes and ourselves and rely solely on him to deliver us from our enemies?
Yes.
How does Jacob's wrestling all night with the messenger of Elohim and becoming a lame and humbled man with a new name figure into this process? So we just talked about Jacob. What was Jacob like when he left his father's house? Was he a humble person? Was he a true follower of Yehovah? I don't see that in his verbiage and the things that the communication that Jacob has through these chapters going over to Laban and to his mom's family. Instead, what we see is Jacob striving, as we just said, to do everything in his own might and power. So, is this the man that's going to be the next generation of Yah's promises? At the time he left, no. At the time he left, he looked like an unregenerate, carnal human being. When he left, he made a promise to God, didn't he? What was that promise? He said, "If you do this, 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 and this, then I will be your servant." Conditions, right? Pretty impressive. The sneaking conniver is laying down conditions on the Yehovah, the creator of the universe, on how our relationship is going to work. That's a lot of times how humans act, isn't it? Especially in our carnality. We go to God and say, "God, I will be for you if you do this, 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 and this for me." And Jacob was no different. Jacob is a perfect example of oftentimes our own walk in our own lives. We want to be able to, shall we say, have our cake and eat it too. Do all the things we like to do in the way we want to do them, but still have Yah bless us and never have any problems come on our way, and never any issues, and never any deer hit our cars, and always put a hedge of protection around our vehicles, and never have our political races go the way we don't want them to go, and the list goes on. Did Jacob gain the victory in his life through appeasing Esau, or by wrestling with his own limitations? If we look at the whole passage here and speaking about the wrestling, that we just talked about. The thing that sometimes challenges so many people into understanding what was going on in this passage. Was Jacob wrestling with the God of the universe? Was he like doing true grappling and wrestling around all night long in the ground with God? And did he come out a victor against the God of the universe? So much so that God had, bless me as I hold you here, God. Is that what's going on in this passage? Or is God teaching Jacob a major lesson? Is Yah using this experience to change his servant forever? When Jacob goes into this situation, he's Jacob, the heel grabber. What is a heel grabber? What is the whole point of calling your son heel grabber? I know that he was grabbing his brother's ankle, in essence saying, no, me first. That's how I look at it. You know that one where the kids are trying to get to the line first, and like, no, me first, no, me. You ever seen that in the lines in school and stuff, trying to get to the bathroom first, or drink, or you name it, or get into the lunch line. Seen it many times. Many children doing that. Human nature at its best. I think that's the concept of what Jacob was. He's like, no, me first, even though he was the second. His selfish attitudes were the things that came out, and he desired to do the most. And he thought that he could be successful in everything he was doing by his own mind. Which is kind of interesting, because it sounds like from the passages of scripture that Esau was like two of them, Could probably squished him with his thumb, punched his lights out, shot him with an arrow from 100 yards, that kind of a thing. So when he wrestles with Yah in this passage, Yah is wrestling with him. He's taking him all night long. And he's going toe to toe. And Jacob's fighting with all his might. Now my children say that my wife and I are both stubborn. Yeah, we're stubborn. Hopefully in a good way. And we enjoy talking and then acting stubborn and trying to get our point across and things like that. Does anybody else do that? I don't know. I think that we probably all do that, and try to get our point across. Jacob was the ultimate in stubbornness. He may not have had the most strength. He may not have had the most smarts, but he definitely was stubborn, and he was going to do everything he could to be successful. And that's when he left his father Isaac and Rebekah's house. That's the Jacob that left. But the Jacob that came back was right on that razor's edge of a life-changing experience. He was ready, but not quite. And this wrestling match is that last thing that pushes Jacob over the edge into an understanding of his relationship with the creator of the universe. It's the last major hurdle that had to be done in order to get him to truly understand who he was and what Yah wanted him to be. So he wrestles with him. He wrestles all night. And right as the sun's coming up, the angel of Yehovah says, let me go. And he says, no, not until you bless me. And he says, I'm going to bless you. And he does. But he leaves him with one other thing, doesn't he? A really unique, weird little side note almost to this whole narrative. It says that he touches his hip and immediately he becomes lame. Now, bear with me here. You've got the angel of Yehovah, and it says he's not winning all night long against them, and then all in 1 second he goes, doop, and the game's over. Did the angel of Yehovah, was he incapable of winning that match at any given time? No. He was, yes, he was. He was not able to fail at any given time. That's what the no was in my brain at that point in time. He was not able to fail. He could have taken this match in the first second. But he was wrestling to challenge Jacob to see where he needed to go. And finally, at the end of it, Jacob understood. And Jacob's life was changed from heel grabber to the prince of Elohim, the one who was going to carry forward the promises of his grandfather and his father to the nation of people. I think it's interesting that Abraham, in essence, only has a couple kids. Isaac only seems to have one, at least that we're really told about. Or two, excuse me, two. Sorry. Brain leaving me there for a moment. Only has two. It's kind of hard to gain a nation out of two children. Typically, they say you need at least, in order for a family to regenerate itself to the next generation, you need at least 3 children. If 2 only replaces the 2 are going, and you'll never grow beyond those 2. So you have to multiply. And then comes along Jacob. Jacob's the one who looks least the character of the one who is going to be the progenitor of God's people. And yet God makes him the progenitor. And by the time his family goes down to Egypt, how many are they? 70. 70 people. And God used the one who was least likely to be the one that grew into a nation, into many nations. All it took was him to stop wrestling with God and instead allow God to move him forward. He had to come out of Babylon and come into the land of Israel. Come out of the world and become part of God's people. He had to understand that he could not do these things in his own hands, but instead trust in Yah to go before him. When we look at this story of Jacob's life, I, in studying this week, saw so many new things that challenged me in my life. In a time where I always feel like I am at my weakest, Yah is there to bring me forward if, and I mean that with a big if I allow him. And I see in each and every one of us here, I'm sure that each of us has an experience or a thing that we are going through or will soon go through that will challenge our spiritual walk in our relationship with Yah. Whether it's buying magazines at more than we've ever done, or dealing with family, or health issues. I mean, all of us, I think everybody here has struggles. But Yah is faithful. Don't put him into the thing of, I will do this, this, and this, if you do this, though. Say, I am going to do these things because I trust in you, and then I'm going to see how you are going to bless me. But do not forget that Jacob at the end of all this said, you told me to do this. You told me to come back to the land, to my people, to my family, where my brother's waiting to kill me. You told me to do this. And I'm going to trust you to carry that out. One commentator I was reading about this talked about the fact that how many of us in the story, or the movie we're watching, let's say a mystery movie or the action adventure movie that we're watching, and the main character is going through, and the bad guy has him right at the last second. He's about ready to shoot him at point blank range, and he walks over and he's got him, and the guy's down there and he's completely helpless. And you're like, oh, it's going to be the end. But then you remember, wait a minute, that's the hero. He can't die. He's got to be the hero. So you relax. Okay, good. And sure enough, the hero does some amazing thing, or out of nowhere comes a crane and wham, knocks the guy out of there and saves the day, and the hero gets up and claims the victory. That's how it is with our wonderful and gracious God, who does not forget his promises. We need to rely upon those promises and trust in those promises. Do not think that if we do not do as Yah says we are to do, that he will not come through in the end. Have faith, trust in him, and look for his grace, his protection to bring us forward in each and every one of these circumstances. So whenever you have a rock and a hard place that you're in between, don't hide in fear. Go boldly to the Father and allow him to guide you in that time. Shabbat shalom.